strategic thinking versus strategic planning.
The concept of strategy is often used interchangeably for the concept of strategy formation. Although it is easy to blend, even confuse the two, in reality, they are distinct, but related activities. In fact, the standard dictionary definition of the word strategy only contributes to the lack of clarity. On the Merriam-Webster.com/dictionary website, the definition of strategy is as follows. 1a. 1. The science and art of employing the political, economic, psychological, and military forces of a nation or group of nations to afford the maximum support to adopted policies in peace or war. 2. The science and art of military command exercise to meet the enemy in combat under advantageous conditions. b. A variety of or instance of the use of strategy. 2a. A careful plan or method, a clever stratagem. b. The art of devising or employing plans or stratagems toward a goal. It is not until you get to 2a of the definition that the meaning of strategy as applied in the context of business becomes evident. In order to clarify the definition, it becomes appropriate to consider the concept of strategy separately from the process of strategy formation. To start, strategy embraces almost all of the critical activities of a firm. That is, strategy provides a sense of unity, direction, and purpose, as well as accommodating the changes necessitated by the firm's environment. Hacks 44 suggests that the following 6 dimensions need be included in any unifying definition of strategy. 1. Strategy as a coherent, unifying, and integrative pattern of decisions. Strategy gives rise to the plans that assure that the basic objectives of the enterprise are met, and that it is conscious, explicit, and proactive. 2. Strategy needs to be considered as a means of establishing an organization's purpose in terms of its long-term objectives, action programs, and resource allocation priorities. This clearly indicates that resource allocation is a firm's most critical aspect of strategic implementation and effectiveness. 3. Strategy needs to be considered as a definition of a firm's competitive domain. One of the principal concerns of strategy is defining the businesses a firm is in or intends to be in, and relates back to dimension 1, mentioned earlier. 4. Strategy needs to be considered as a response to external opportunities and threats and in internal strengths and weakness as a means of achieving competitive advantage. A central objective of strategy is the achievement of a long-term sustainable advantage over a firm's key competitors. 5. Strategy needs to be considered as a logical system for differentiating managerial tasks at corporate, business and functional levels. This point recognizes the various hierarchical levels in most organizations, and that each level has differing managerial responsibilities in terms of their contribution in both defining and operationalizing the strategy of the firm. 6. Strategy is a definition of the economic and non-economic contribution the firm intends to make to its stakeholders. It is easy for managers to fall into the trap of bottom-line, short-term profitability as the ultimate driving force. Sustained profitability is the legitimate and desired outcome of a well-executed strategy. It becomes apparent from the previously mentioned text that strategy encompasses the overall purpose of the organization. As such, defining it properly entails examining all of the multiple aspects that comprise the whole. Strategy becomes a framework by which an organization asserts its continuity, while managing to adapt to the changing environment in order to achieve competitive advantage. 45. Further examination of the literature on the difference between strategic thinking and strategic planning provides little clarity. Strategic planning is often associated with a programmatic, analytical thought process, whereas strategic thinking refers to a creative, divergent thought process. The source of the confusion lies in the fact that although the terms are frequently used, They are often used in fundamentally different ways by different authors. For some, strategic thinking and planning are distinct modes that are both useful at different stages in the strategic management process. For example, Mintzberg. Others posit that strategic thinking is not so much creative as analytical, Porter. Still, for some, strategic planning remains an analytical activity, but the organizational practices surrounding it have been transformed, whereas others believe the real purpose of the analytical tools of strategic planning is to facilitate creativity, which is a part of strategic thinking. Last, for a select group, strategic planning is a useless activity that should be scrapped in favor of strategic thinking. 46. Heraclius 47 proposes that strategic planning and strategic thinking are two distinct thinking modes, and that strategic thinking needs to precede strategic planning. This view is based upon the premise that planning cannot produce strategies because its focus is programmatic, formalized, and analytical. Planning is what happens after the strategy has been decided upon, discovered, or purely emerges. Mintzberg 48 endorses this view by suggesting that the concept of strategic planning is based upon three principal fallacies. First is the fallacy of prediction, the belief that planners can accurately predict what will happen in the marketplace. Second is the fallacy of detachment, the basis of which is that effective strategies can be produced through formalized processes by planners who are detached from business operations and the market. Last is the fallacy of formalization, a disputable concept suggesting that formalized procedures can produce strategies, whereas their appropriate function is to operationalize existing strategies.